While a few films and novels have drawn inspiration from the crimes of Robert Hansen, his case is far from being a household name. Known as the Butcher Baker or the Human Hunter, Hansen ranks among the most depraved serial killers in the history of the United States. To many, Alaska seems an idyllic paradise for hunters and adventurers with the means to seek out a profound connection with nature. Its sprawling wilderness is home to a rich tapestry of wildlife. Eagles, beluga whales, orcas, walruses, wolves, moose, Dall sheep, and a formidable variety of bears. Replete with lakes, mountain ranges, and immense natural parks, Alaska is the largest state in the U.S. and a realm of staggering scale covering over 1.7 million square kilometers. Yet, it remains one of the most sparsely populated territories on Earth. Its most populous city, Anchorage, with over 100,000 residents, saw its population swell after 1968. Following the discovery of vast oil deposits that fueled its substantial growth. Thousands of Americans flocked to Anchorage during the economic boom of the 1970s, chasing fortune. But life in this northern frontier can be unforgiving for the uninitiated. While summer temperatures can be pleasant, hovering between 24 and 26 degrees Celsius, winter plunges the mercury to a bone-chilling -25. In some parts, the sun vanishes for weeks on end, while in others, the night lasts but a few hours, a disorienting reality that can trigger severe sleep disorders in newcomers. The climate, the vast distances between residential areas and commercial centers, and the constant threat of bear attacks for those living on the periphery, all contribute to a challenging existence. To top it all, the cost of living in Anchorage soars 30% above the national average, a significant disadvantage for many. By the mid-1970s, thousands had settled in the city, drawn by the oil expansion and the construction of the Trans-Alaska Pipeline, one of the most ambitious infrastructure projects of its time. The majority were young men, eager to capitalize on the boom and build small fortunes. It was this influx that fueled Anchorage's expansion, but it also created a ravenous demand for alcohol, sex, and drugs. Fourth Avenue, in the heart of the city, transformed into the epicenter of this new vice economy. Strip clubs, massage parlors, and saunas sprang up, and the sex trade became incredibly lucrative. So much so that women from other states would travel to Anchorage to work for a few months in the city's burgeoning nightclub scene. Due to the frigid temperatures, sex workers couldn't linger on the streets. Instead, they found their clients inside the bars, which, in a telling sign of the times, closed for only 1 hour a day to wipe down tables and clear out the drunks. The bars were, for all intents and purposes, open 24/7 and always packed. And while the city's economic growth was undeniable, its quality of life plummeted. At the time, Alaska had one of the highest rates of alcoholism and venereal disease in the entire country. Suicide rates also surged, placing the state near the top of a grim national ranking. Experts theorized that many of the newcomers who had settled in Alaska simply could not endure the profound isolation. They had found good jobs, but they were far from their families, and the loneliness began to eat away at them. The native population, often wary of the outsiders, offered little solace, making it difficult for the new arrivals to forge friendships and truly adapt. The sex workers and dancers in Anchorage's bars were often outsiders themselves, hired by pimps who arranged their work and lodging. They were frequently young, inexperienced, and utterly alone, moving up and down the West Coast offering their services. By 1980, a couple of girls who danced and prostituted themselves in downtown Anchorage had been reported missing, but the police investigation yielded nothing. Many of these women came and went, moving between states, making it impossible to determine if they had fallen victim to a crime or had simply moved on. Then, on July 17th of that year, in Eklutna, About 45 kilometers north of Anchorage, electricians stumbled upon human remains semi-buried on an abandoned road. They immediately called the police. The body was decomposed and appeared to be that of a young woman. The first detective on the scene was Maxine Farrell from the homicide unit, one of the few female officers in the Anchorage Police Department at the time. Farrell's intuition told her the victim was likely a prostitute, judging by her clothing and cheap jewelry. However, no identification was found at the scene. Later, forensic examiners determined she had been killed by a single stab wound to the chest. Using the victim's skull, experts created a facial reconstruction, and the photograph was sent to every police department in Alaska. The Anchorage Police Department christened her Eklutna Annie. Despite their best efforts, no one could identify her. The body's condition and the cold temperatures made it impossible to estimate a time of death, a crucial detail for any investigation. If Maxine Farrell was right and the victim was a prostitute just passing through, it was unlikely anyone was even looking for her. The chances of solving this crime were exceedingly low. As the months passed, more dancers and prostitutes began to vanish from the area, and Maxine Farrell took charge of several of these reports. She managed to contact some of the missing girls' families and meticulously compiled a worksheet. She concluded that a total of 10 women had disappeared from Anchorage in recent years. Their names were Delene Frey, Teresa Watson, Sue Luna, Angela Feeden, Tamara Pedersen, Roxanne Easley, Lisa Fathrell, Andrea Altieri, Megan Emmerich, and Malai Larson. All of them worked in the city's red light district, their ages ranging from 17 to 41. The common thread was undeniable. All were either sex workers or strippers in the city's bars. Although Farrell had no concrete evidence, she suspected a serial killer was preying on the area and immediately alerted her superiors. No one took her seriously. Her hypothesis was dismissed. While a dozen girls were missing, that didn't necessarily mean they had been murdered. Without bodies, launching an investigation into a hypothetical serial killer was deemed too complex. Despite Farrell's insistence that something truly dark was unfolding, she was ignored. Some of her male colleagues even began to mock her. Alaska is a vast and lonely land, a place where making a body disappear is relatively easy, and finding one is next to impossible. And yet, it happened. On September 12, 1982, an Anchorage police officer named John Daly was hunting moose with a friend along the banks of the Nick River. As they walked, they spotted a mound protruding from the soil. It was a shoe and a piece of semi-buried fabric that looked like part of a pair of denim jeans. As he pulled at it, Daly confirmed the chilling sight of human skin within. A team from the Alaska State Troopers arrived shortly after Daly and his friend found a phone to report the discovery. As they excavated, they confirmed it was the body of a young woman in an advanced state of decay. She was blindfolded and had been buried in a shallow grave. A meticulous search of the area uncovered a .223 caliber shell casing. Later, forensic examiners would confirm the woman had died from a gunshot to the heart. The location was remote, accessible only by boat, plane, or an all-terrain vehicle. The police concluded she had been abducted, brought to this isolated spot, murdered, and buried. Dental records identified the victim as Cherry Morrow, a 23-year-old stripper. A few months earlier, her boyfriend had reported her missing. He explained to Sergeant Glenn Flothy, the lead investigator on the case, that Cherry had accepted an offer to pose nude for a photographer, but never returned from the appointment. Flothy reviewed the files of other missing women and discovered a chilling parallel. One of them, Sue Luna, had also received an offer from a stranger to pose for photographs. The dancers and sex workers of Anchorage were well aware of the disappearances, and the discovery of Morrow's body fanned the flames of a rumor already spreading through the red light district. A killer was on the loose. Several women agreed to help the police, feeding information to undercover officers about violent clients or those with strange fetishes, pointing them out as possible suspects. More than 15 men were brought in and interrogated, but none seemed to be the man they were looking for. Around 4 a.m. on June 13, 1983, police received a call from a truck driver. He had found a young woman naked and handcuffed, screaming for help in the middle of the street. She claimed she had escaped from a man who had raped her and was planning to kill her. After dropping her at the motel where she was staying, the driver decided to alert the authorities. The police found the young woman in her room and took her to the Anchorage station to give her statement. Cindy Paulson, a 17-year-old from Oregon, claimed that the night before, she had gotten into a car with a stranger who offered her $200 for oral sex. At some point, the man snapped a pair of handcuffs on her wrists and threatened her with a pistol, assuring her that if she behaved, he wouldn't harm her. He took her to his house in the Muldoon neighborhood. There, he chained her by the neck to a post in his basement, a room filled with taxidermied animals and hunting trophies. He raped her repeatedly on a large bearskin rug, bit her nipples, and even sodomized her with a hammer, before falling asleep on a chair in the living room. The next morning, he loaded her into his car and drove to Merrill Field Airport. The man told her he was flying her in his plane, a Piper Super Cub, to his cabin in the woods where they would spend the weekend together. Though he promised he would eventually let her go, the young woman knew instantly that her life was in danger. Seizing a moment while her captor was loading the plane, Paulson managed to escape. She ran for her life towards a nearby road, where the truck driver stopped and pulled her to safety. As officers drove Cindy Paulson to a hospital to document her injuries, they passed Merrill Field Airport. The girl instantly identified her kidnapper's plane. An officer contacted the airport and asked for the owner of the Piper Super Cub on the tarmac. The name they were given was Robert Hansen, age 44. The officers were stunned. Hansen was a well-known and respected member of the community. Originally from Iowa, he had moved to Anchorage in the mid-60s, settling down with his wife and 2 children in one of the city's best neighborhoods. He owned a popular bakery, which was his main source of income. He was described as a quiet, somewhat solitary man, but always polite and cordial. He attended church with his family on Sunday mornings and seemed like a perfectly normal person. He was an avid big game hunter who had apparently broken several world records. One of his greatest feats was taking down a Dall sheep with a crossbow. He seemed to be a model citizen and associated with others of similar standing. Hansen did indeed own a plane, but that was hardly an eccentricity in Alaska. Many people owned one to cover the vast distances. For a hunter seeking more challenging prey, getting far away from the city was a practical necessity. Still, the officers decided to visit Hansen that very morning to question him. He was visibly annoyed by the grave accusations and denied everything. He grudgingly allowed the police into his home, and they went straight to the basement, which looked exactly as Cindy Paulson had described it. The animal heads hung on the walls. There was an armchair in the middle of the room and a large bearskin rug where the suspect had allegedly raped her. Hansen insisted he didn't know the girl, but it was obvious Paulson had been in that basement at some point. Yet despite this, there wasn't enough physical evidence to charge him with kidnapping and rape. Hansen finally adopted a cooperative stance and agreed to accompany them to the police station. He insinuated that the girl was simply trying to extort him because of his money and social standing. He explained that while he was home alone, his wife and children were on vacation in Europe. He had an alibi. The previous night, he claimed he was at home with 2 friends for a business dinner. When questioned, both men, also respected members of the community, corroborated Hansen's story. Their statements were taken at face value. Although Paulson's accusations were dismissed, Robert Hansen's name was now on the list of suspects in the Anchorage disappearances. In September 1983, another body was discovered very near the site where Cherry Morrow was found. Once again, it was two hunters who stumbled upon the semi-buried human remains. Dental records identified the victim as a dancer named Paula Golden, 30 years old, who had vanished in April. The medical examiner confirmed she had died from a single gunshot wound to the heart. In the crime scene, investigators uncovered a 223 caliber bullet casing, identical to one found in the grave of Cherry Morrow back in 1982. For Sergeant Glenn Floathy and his team, this discovery made it abundantly clear they were pursuing the same elusive killer. Though they couldn't confirm links to other disappearances, suspicions were mounting within the Anchorage Homicide Department that a serial predator was at large. Determined to press forward, Floathy decided to consult Maxine Farrell, who had devoted years to researching these cases. Farrell offered to join Floathy's team, but higher authorities intervened, denying her involvement. Undeterred by her frustration, she shared all her compiled data on the missing women with him. Around the same time, Officer Greg Baker, one of the first responders to Cindy Paulson's ordeal, grew dissatisfied with the investigation's pace. Digging into Robert Hansen's background, Baker unearthed that Hansen had been arrested in late 1971 for armed assault and attempted kidnapping of Susan Heppert in Anchorage. Hansen posted bail and was released pending trial, only to be linked days later to the abduction and rape of another young woman, Patricia Roberts, who identified him from mugshots. On March 24, 1972, Hansen struck a plea deal, pleading guilty to armed assault on Heppert while evading charges for Roberts' case, resulting in a mere 5-year prison sentence. Yet this wasn't Hansen's first brush with the law. Baker also learned of his 1961 conviction for arson at his former school, which netted him a 3-year term, of which he served just 20 months. Armed with this information, Baker risked reprimand by approaching the Alaska State Police despite the jurisdictional rift between agencies. He believed Hansen was tied to the vanishings and insisted on collaboration. Floathy, leading the probe, reviewed Baker's findings and concluded that Hansen was likely their man, as the evidence pointed squarely at him. To advance, they needed a search warrant for Hansen's home, the probable repository of incriminating evidence, but convincing the district attorney would be no small feat. With Alaska's police lacking experience in serial killer cases, one misstep could derail everything. Thus, they sought expertise from the FBI's John Douglas, a renowned profiler. Douglas arrived in Anchorage in September 1983, accompanied by his colleague Roy Hazelwood. Fresh from his acclaimed work on the Atlanta child murders in 1981, where he and Robert Ressler had crafted a precise profile leading to Wayne Williams's capture, Douglas preferred to build his assessment from scratch. Insisting on no prior details about the suspect, he pored over forensic reports and crime scene photos. One hurdle was Hansen's alibi for Paulson's attack, which Douglas deftly overcame by urging investigators to re-interview his alibis and threaten them with perjury. Under pressure, the witnesses cracked, admitting Hansen had fabricated the story. From the evidence, Douglas profiled the killer as a man with low self-esteem, likely harboring resentment toward women due to adolescent struggles, perhaps stuttering, acne, or a slight build that fostered feelings of inferiority. He predicted the perpetrator was an avid hunter with a firearms collection, corroborated by the 223 casings. Even though the victims were found fully clothed and unmutilated, Douglas surmised the killer took trophies such as jewelry or IDs hidden away. He described a mature individual with a history of violence against women, astonishing the officers with how closely it matched Hansen, a thin man scarred by acne and plagued by a stutter. Douglas theorized that Hansen had escalated from hunting animals to preying on prostitutes whom he viewed as beneath him. He envisioned Hansen luring them to remote woods via airplane, allowing them a head start before pursuing them with a rifle, turning the chase into a thrill. Douglas advised that a search might reveal a journal or records of the crimes. Bolstered by his profile and the insights from Farrell and Baker, authorities secured a warrant and raided Hansen's home on October 27, 1983. In the attic, they discovered a Ruger Mini 14 matching the .223 bullets, along with jewelry, driver's licenses, and IDs from missing women. Though no diary surfaced, a map of Anchorage marked with 21 asterisks caught their eye, one directly over a body dump site, providing concrete evidence for at least 2 murders. Hansen initially refused to cooperate, demanding a lawyer, but by February 22, 1984, he confessed to killing Annie Aklutna. Confronted with the map, he crumbled, admitting to 17 murders in total. A respected community member, devoted family man, and successful baker, Hansen hid a dark double life. Born on February 15, 1939 in Esterville, Iowa, he endured a strict father and a childhood marred by bullying over his stutter and acne. Isolated and rejected by girls, he turned to hunting, his first sexual encounter with a prostitute in 1957 proving unsatisfying and fueling his need for control. After a brief military stint, Hansen married in 1960, but his mental health issues, bipolar disorder, obsessive traits, and emotional immaturity led to arson in 1961 and subsequent imprisonment. Post-release, his behavior worsened with thefts for the adrenaline rush. He remarried in 1969, moved to Anchorage in 1967, and built a bakery empire, yet secretly frequented red light districts. His attacks began with non-prostitutes like Heppert and Roberts, but he shifted to sex workers for discretion, perfecting a modus operandi, luring them with offers of money, flying them to his remote cabin, assaulting them, and hunting them down. If they complied, he might spare them. Otherwise, violence ensued. In a plea deal, Hansen agreed to help locate bodies in exchange for minimal media coverage and charges limited to 4 murders, earning him 461 years in prison. Despite this, leaked recordings later featured in documentaries like The Mind of a Monster. Authorities recovered 13 bodies, but experts like Douglas estimate the true toll exceeded 30. Convicted on February 27, 1984, Hansen served his sentence in Alaska until his death on August 21, 2014 at age 75, from an undisclosed illness. The idea of a hunter trading animal prey for human victims is nothing new, as John Douglas revealed in his book, Mindhunter. While profiling Robert Hansen in 1983, Douglas was immediately reminded of Richard Connell's 1924 short story, The Most Dangerous Game. In it, a character named General Zaroff lives on an island known as Ship Trap Island. Whenever a castaway washes ashore, Zaroff equips them with a knife, food, and water, then gives them a 3-hour head start. Only then does he begin his own pursuit, armed with a firearm, an assistant, and a pack of hounds. As Zaroff explains, big game hunting no longer satisfied him. He had decided to pursue humans, a far more interesting and complex prey. Based on the evidence in the case, Douglas concluded that the killer he was searching for followed this exact pattern. Perhaps Robert Hansen truly had grown bored with hunting animals and craved the new challenge of hunting human beings. The irony, however, is that his reputation as a master hunter was cast into doubt following his capture. It was then discovered that some of his most prized hunting trophies were, in fact, fakes he had commissioned from a taxidermist.